Fee 204, Study Session 5, St. Anselm of Canterbury. Introduction. In this lecture, you will learn about St. Anselm. Despite clashes between dialecticians and conservatives, the 11th century produced one thinker who was both an original philosopher in his own right and a theologian sufficiently orthodox to be canonized. St. Anselm of Canterbury, 1033 to 1109, and also whose originality and subtlety earned him the title of Father of Scholasticism. Best known in the modern era for his ontological arguments, designed to prove God's existence, Anselm made significant contributions to metaphysics, ethics, and philosophy of language. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to describe how St. Anselm used the term good to explain his metaphysical thoughts. State the focus of St. Anselm's method of inquiry. Describe what Anselm considers to be the most significant metaphysical truth. State why St. Anselm's view on freedom is different from the traditional account, and describe why St. Anselm considers philosophy of language as a doctrine of science. The philosophical thoughts of St. Anselm. Most of Anselm's work systematically reflects on the content of Christian doctrine: Trinity, Incarnation, the procession of the Holy Spirit, original sin, the fall of Lucifer, redemption and atonement, virgin conception, grace and foreknowledge, the divine attributes, and the nature of sin. He called this reflective activity meditation, and also in a famous phrase, faith in search of understanding. His search for understanding is of interest to philosophers for three reasons. First, he often addresses argument to those who do not share his dogmatic commitments. That is, he offers proofs based only on natural reason. He begins the monologion, for example, with the claim that a person who does not initially believe that there is a God with the traditional divine attributes can at least persuade himself of most of these things by reason alone, if he has even moderate ability. Likewise, the ontological argument of the prosologion, and indeed the treatise as a whole, is addressed to the biblical fool who denies the existence of God. This approach, later known as natural theology, may be given in support of, but does not depend upon particular points of doctrine. Second, even when Anselm assumes certain dogmatic theses, his analysis is often directed to specifically philosophical issues in the case at hand, and thereby has broader implications. While discussing Lucifer's sin and subsequent fall in his Casu Diaboli, for instance, Anselm formulates a series of general theses about responsibility and motivation that holds not only of Lucifer's primal sin or Adam's original sin, but which applies to ordinary cases of choice. Elsewhere, he offers a defense of metaphysical realism, a reconciliation of foreknowledge with the freedom of the will, an account of sentential truth conditions, and so on. Third, even when pursuing his doctrinal agenda, Anselm is always a philosopher's philosopher. Distinctions are drawn and defended, theories proposed, examples given to support theses, and tightly constructed arguments are the means by which he mediates on Christian themes. He uses the self-same method when non-doctrinal commitment is at stake, as in the semantic analysis of the De Grammatico, the account of power and the ability in his fragmentary notes, or the analysis of freedom of choice in the De Libertate Arbitrii. For Anselm, understanding the very understanding for which faith is searching is a philosophical enterprise, and his treatment of even the naughtiest doctrinal difficulties is clearly philosophical in character. Intellectual integrity, he held, demands it. He further held that although a philosophical approach to matters of faith is necessary, it is not sufficient. Hence, in addition to systematic treatises, Anselm also composed prayers and devotional works. Anselm's metaphysics. Following Augustine, Anselm is, broadly speaking, a Platonist in metaphysics. A thing has a future in virtue of his relation to something. A thing has a future in virtue of his relation to something paradigmatically, exhibiting that future. Anselm begins the Monologion, for example, by noting the diversity of good things in the world, and argues that we should hold that there is some one thing through which all goods whatsoever are good, and that one thing is itself a great good, and indeed supremely good. He reasons that we can judge that some things are better or worse than others only if there is something, namely, goodness, which is the same in each, though in different degrees, a claim sometimes dubbed the Platonic principles. For Plato's use of it in the case of equal sticks and stones in his Phaedo, to establish the uniqueness of this one thing, Anselm applies the Platonic principle again and rules out an infinite regress. Furthermore, since the goodness of good things is derivative, and things might be good in any degree imaginable, it follows that the one thing through which all good things are good must be supremely good. It can be neither equaled nor excelled by the goodness of any good thing that is good through it. Note that the supreme good does not, strictly speaking, have goodness, but rather is goodness itself, a quasi-substantial entity whose nature is goodness. Much of Anselm's metaphysics is a sustained study of such relations of dependence and independence. Things may be the way they are through themselves, per se, or through another. Anselm holds, and roughly the same reason can be applied to futures other than goodness. The later medieval tradition called such futures pure perfections, and their defining characteristics is that it is unqualifiably better to have them than not. Just as the presence of goodness in things leads to the conclusion that there is some one thing that is paradigmatically good, through which all good things have their goodness, Anselm argues too that the bare fact of their existence leads to the conclusion that there is some one thing through which everything else exists. Moreover, this one thing paradigmatically exists, namely, it exists through itself and of necessity. It is existence itself, something whose nature is existence. Anselm drops from the Platonic principle the requirement that things having a certain future exhibit it in varying degrees. Rather, the possession of the same future by itself licenses the inference that there is something each thing has, something exemplifying the future itself. Likewise, the key move in his argument that there is only one such thing that exists through itself, rather than a plurality of independent things, each equally existing through itself, is to apply the Platonic principle to the future of self-existence itself. This entails that there is a unique self-existent nature. Furthermore, since it is better to exist through oneself than through another, independence is better than dependence. The supreme good must exist through itself, and hence is identical with the self-existent nature, the source of the existence and goodness of all else there is. Anselm concludes that there is accordingly a certain nature or substance or existence that through itself is good and great, and through itself is what it is, and through which anything that exists is genuinely either good or great or anything at all. In short, order Anselm shows that this being is appropriately called God, and the remainder of the Monologion is devoted to establishing that God has the full range of divine attributes, simplicity, unchangeable. Take two. Unchangeableness, take two. Internality, triune nature of persons, and the likes. Anselm on ethics. Anselm's positive ethical theory is grounded on his theory of the will and free choice. One of his most striking and original contributions, the traditional account of free will, holds that an agent is free when there are genuine alternatives open to her, so that she can do one or another of them as she pleases. This traditional account is sometimes called bilateral, since the agent must have at least two possible courses of action in order to act freely. In his De Libertate Arbitrii, by contrast, Anselm defends a unilateral normative conception of freedom, according to which an agent is free when two conditions are jointly satisfied. A. She has the ability to perform a given action, and B. That action is the one she ought to perform. That is, it is objectively the right action and hence the one she ought to want to perform roughly. That an agent is free when she can act as she ought, regardless of alternatives. Anselm, like all medieval philosophers, holds that what an agent ought to do is an objective matter. Note that Anselm is careful to say that an agent is free when she can act as she ought, not that she does so act. We commit wrongdoing freely when the right course of action is open to us, but we fail to pursue it. The crucial issue, of course, is when an agent has the ability to perform a given action. Anselm devotes most of his fragmentary notes on ability and power to investigating this issue. His analysis tracks connections among ascriptions of ability, responsibility, and the cause of an action, much in the spirit of contemporary philosophical reflections on tort law. Very roughly, Anselm thinks that there are a variety of freedom-cancelling conditions. Some of these, such as compulsion, are extremely sensitive to the kind of ability at stake. A ballerina, a female ballet dancer, tied to a chair cannot dance, but still has the ability to do so. More exactly, she does not have the opportunity to exercise the ability, though she retains the ability were the constraint removed. She could exercise her ability at will. Anselm argues that the ballerina's ability to dance is what matters to her free choice, according to A, not whether she currently has the opportunity to exercise her ability. Now, suppose that the ballerina, no longer tied to a chair, has through excessive dancing injured her legs so badly that she can dance only if a doctor operates on her legs. Here too, Anselm maintains she has not lost the ability to dance, but only the opportunity to exercise her ability, and can regain the opportunity only if a doctor helps her to do so. This is the situation in which Anselm finds the human race, through the wrongful exercise of our free choice in original sin. We have lost the opportunity to freely do what is right, and can only recover it through the actions of another, namely through God's grace. We can legitimately be faulted for not doing what is right even now, despite the fact that we cannot do what is right at will by our unaided efforts. We have the ability, and we lost the opportunity to exercise it through its improper use. But these facts do not stand in the way of our being free to act rightly, hence our culpability for failing to do so. Whether we agree with Anselm or not, his analysis is subtle and provocative, and represents a new level of sophistication in the analysis of free choice. Anselm puts forward a famous thought experiment in which God creates an angel with free will, but without any motive for action whatsoever, a free being with no ends at all. He argues that such a being would never act, since any action is motivated by pursuit of an end, and by hypothesis, the angel has no ends. nor is an angel ever prompted by biological needs, and this is the point of using an angel rather than a human being in the example. From this case, Anselm and later philosophers drew the moral that at least some ultimate end has to be given to agents in order for there to be action at all, and hence the possibility of moral action. An agent must therefore have at least one ultimate end, an end she does not choose. Yet, one end is not enough for moral agency. Anselm argues that there must be two ultimate and incommensurable ends to make sense of moral choices, and specifically of moral dilemmas. He reasons as follows. If an agent had only a single end, she would always act in pursuit of that end, unless deceived or misled through ignorance. There will be no moral conflicts. Her motives and reasons for actions will be transparently in the service of a single ultimate end. Nevertheless, our actions are free because of the pull between these ends. Even if we consistently take one side or the other, human fulfillment for Anselm thus turns out to be surprisingly paradoxical. We do not deserve to be happy unless we are prepared on principle to forego happiness for justice. Indeed, only by pursuing justice for its own sake can we attain the self-interested happiness we have scorned. The price of moral agency is that happiness is the reward for those who do not pursue it. Anselm on the existence of God. The existence of God is therefore the most fundamental metaphysical truth. Anselm tells us that he sought to replace the chain of arguments outlined above with a single argument that needed nothing but itself alone to prove its conclusion, and will be strong enough to establish that God truly exists and is supreme good, depending on nothing else, but on whom all other things depend for their existence and well-being. In doing so, he devised one of the most discussed arguments in the history of philosophy, presented in Proslogion 2 as follows. Therefore, Lord, you who give understanding to faith, give me understanding to the extent you know to be appropriate. And you are that which we believe. And indeed, we believe you to be something that which nothing greater can be taught. Or is there not some such nature? Then since the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Psalms 13 verse 1. But certainly, that same fool, when he hears this very thing I say, something that which nothing greater can be thought, understands what he hears, and what he understands is in his understanding, even if he were not to understand that to be. It is one matter that a thing is in the understanding, another to understand a thing to be. For when the painter thinks beforehand what is going to be done, he has it in the understanding, but does not yet understand it to be what he does not yet make. Yet, once he has painted, he both has it in the understanding and also understands it to be what he now makes. Therefore, even the fool is convinced that there is in the understanding even something that which nothing greater can be thought. Since when he hears this, he understands, and whatever is understood is in the understanding. And certainly, that than which a greater cannot be thought, cannot be in the understanding alone. If indeed it is even in the understanding only, it can be thought to be in reality which is greater. Thus, if that than which a greater cannot be thought is in the understanding alone, the very thing that which a greater cannot be thought is that than which a greater can be thought. But certainly this cannot be. Therefore, without a doubt, something than which a greater is not able to be thought exists, both in the understanding and in reality. The logical analysis, validity and soundness of this argument have been a matter of debate since Anselm came up with it. Yet, Each general drift is clear. God, Anselm tells us, is something than which nothing greater can be thought. Note that he does not present this formula as a definition or part of the meaning of God, but rather only as a claim that is true of God. The indirect negative formulation is important since we cannot adequately think of or conceive God as such. So understand that the denial of God's existence leads to a contradiction as follows: that than which a greater cannot be thought, cannot itself be thought not to exist. Since if it were, we could think of something greater than it, namely, that than which nothing greater can be thought, existing in reality. But it is logically impossible to think of something greater than that, than which nothing greater can be thought. Thus, the denial of God's existence must be rejected, and so God's existence affirmed. Hence, Anselm's argument as a whole is ad hominem, directed against someone who accepts the claim that God is something than which nothing greater can be thought. Once accepted, Anselm offers a reduction ad absurdum of the denial of God's existence. In the Monologion and Proslogion, Anselm says that he is trying to establish the existence of a nature, or equally an essence or a substance. The divine nature is identical with the very qualities of which it is paradigm, and furthermore, is also a concrete particular. God is an individual, albeit a three-in-one individual. In addition to such an extraordinary nature, there are also common natures, such as human nature, which is present in each human being as his or her individual nature. Anselm holds that such common natures become singular when combined with a collection of distinctive properties that distinguish an individual from all others. In the same work, he inveighs against the extreme nominalism of Roscelin of Compiègne, that anyone taking universals to be no more than vocal utterances deserves no hearing on theological matters. Roscelin cannot understand how a plurality of humans are one human in species, and cannot understand how anything is a human being if not an individual. While the extent of Anselm's metaphysical realism is a matter of debate, remarks such as these make it clear countenance some form of realism about universals. Anselm on philosophy of language. Anselm adopts Augustine's view of language as a system of signs. This general category covers linguistic items such as utterances, inscriptions, gestures, and at least some acts of thoughts. It also covers non-linguistic items such as icons, statues, smoke, a sign of fire, and even human actions, which Anselm says are signs that the agent thinks the action should be done. Roughly, a sign signifies something by bringing it to mind. This single semantic relation, founded on psychology, is the foundation of Anselm's semantics. As noted above, common names, at least natural kind terms, signifying common nature, and proper names signify the common nature in combination with distinctive properties. Non-denoting terms are problematic. Nothing seems to be significant only by signifying nothing, a paradox that perplexes Anselm in several treatises. Troublesome as they are, Anselm directs his most sustained inquiry into semantics not at empty names but at denominative names. Roughly, what we call adjectives, the difficulty he addresses in his De Grammatico, can be stated simply. White cannot signify whiteness. Whiteness does that. Nor can it signify what is white. Snow does that. What then does it signify? Anselm's answer depends on several distinctions, the most important of which is between direct and indirect. Take two. the most important of which is between direct and indirect signification. A term signifies directly if it brings the proper and customary signification to mind. It signifies other things indirectly, perhaps things linked somehow to what the term directly signifies. As a first approximation, then, Anselm holds that whiteness directly signifies whiteness, whereas white directly signifies whiteness and indirectly signifies things that have whiteness and is used to pick out the latter. Verbs, for Anselm, signify actions or doings of some sort, broadly speaking, including even passive processes, that is their distinguishing feature. Names and subjects, respectively, signify subjects and their doings. When combined in a sentence, the truth of the sentence reflects the underlying metaphysical dependence of doings on doers, of actions on subjects. Now, just as Anselm's theory of meaning applies to more than words, so too his theory of truth applies to more than statements. Study session summary. In this study session, you have learned that Anselm's philosophical goal was to provide conclusive arguments to rationally demonstrate the Christian teachings. 2. His conviction that faith necessarily preceded understanding greatly influenced his method, metaphysics, ethics, and so on. 3. In all, his ontological argument for God's existence attests to his great genius and has ensured his place in the history of philosophy. And lastly, his ontological argument today is debated and has attracted the interest of many scholars, admirers, and critics. End of study session 5. Thank you for listening.